Yo, 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 what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Orioles Theory, your number one-stop shop for all things Baltimore Orioles related. I'm your co-host and creator of O's Theory, Tyler Barbaras, and joined with me is none other than my good friend Clay Selgin. But if you can see, if you guys got eyes, you guys can notice that we have a special guest on today's episode, former MLB hitting coach, long time coach in the MLB. He doesn't really need that big of an introduction, but his name is Don Long. Don, thank you for joining the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Clay, how are you doing as well? I had
Good
to
day.
ask Mr. Long how he's doing first, but you seem pretty good.
Absolutely. I'm good. It's a long day of work and get to talk to two of my friends here, so couldn't be more happy.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun one. But before we get into all of that stuff, let me give one quick shout out to our sponsor, O Squared Residential Design. Look, we know what it takes to build a winning team, and O Squared knows what it takes to build winning spaces. They're a woman-owned, family-operated company right here in Maryland, specializing in kitchen and bathroom renovations. Whether you're looking to restore, replace, or completely remodel, they deliver excellence in every square inch. Serving homeowners across the state of Maryland. Check them out at osquaredesign.com. That's osquaredesign.com. Mr. Long, it's a pleasure for you to hop on the show. Obviously, you have, I want to say, 4+ decades of baseball experience. We just want to pick your brain, see what if you have any sort of stories to share with the people during your time coaching, maybe even playing, if you have, any players that you really, really like, some of the adjustments that they made, maybe a philosophy that has taken you a long, long way in this field. Now let Clay do the honors with asking the first question. Clay, what do we have for Mr. Don?
Absolutely, Don, and it's a pleasure that you joined us. First thing I wanted to really ask was who had the biggest influence on you when it came to learning how to be a hitting coach, learning how to teach hitting, whether at the minor league level and at the major league level. And then on top of that, the years that you spent managing in the minor leagues, what was the adjustment from managing, having to develop minor leaguers to making that transition back with the Phillies and teaching hitting all of a sudden again at the, coordinating level?
So I think the first biggest influence on me growing up, I would say, would be my dad. He coached me a lot in, a couple different sports, but, just his patience and working with everybody and just how he presented himself, as a coach and kind of a teacher and a mentor. And then when I got into college at Washington State, we had the assistant coach there was a guy named Ralph Dickinson, who has been around baseball. He was in Houston a couple years and did a lot of different things in the game. And he was relentless in his work ethic. And I remember in the fall when we would have kind of open tryouts, there were scholarship players and they'd have guys that could walk on. And there was one kid in particular that walked on and bless him, but he wasn't going to make the team. But, Ralph was a guy that would go throw extra batting practice to this kid endlessly, even though he had no hope of, making the team. And that really had an impression on me in terms of the work ethic and the willingness to help. And then once I got kind of transitioned from the managing side of the minor leagues into it being hitting specific, there was a guy named Lee Elia, who had been a longtime hitting coach with the Mariners, had been a bench coach in many places and actually managed the Cubs and the Phillies. And just the way that he approached players and player development, just people in general, really had a big influence on me.
You talked about work ethic and how important obviously that is to where you can hopefully, work your way all the way up to the professionals and then to the major league roster. Is there one player or maybe a few players in particular that, you just look and you go, wow, that work ethic is special. It's going to take that kid places?
There was a lot of guys in the minor leagues. It's really kind of a two-part answer because there was guys that had that work ethic and had that desire that ultimately may have made it. And there were also guys, especially in my time managing in the minor leagues, where I thought, boy, they're talented, but I don't know, because they don't have much of a work ethic, and they got to the big leagues and had 15 or 16-year major league careers, so that's not the only thing that's going to define whether or not a guy is going to make it. But we had, I'm trying to think back on my time with the Angels, managing guys like, gosh, there were so many of them, Salmon and Damian Easley and Todd Green, and I'm sure I'm leaving guys out. In my time with the Phillies, we drafted Ryan Howard and Chase Utley and Jimmy Rollins. I think had been there maybe a year by the time I got to the Phillies. So you could see the talent, and you could see the work ethic. And the most interesting part about some of those guys is, as they're working their way up through the minor leagues, I used to tell other players, like at the big league level, who are just getting to the big leagues, you look at some of these players who had established themselves at the major league level, and you think of them for what you see now, but you didn't get the opportunity to see them on the way up. And I said, they have the same type of challenges and struggles that you had, but they just persevered and kept going. And I would put, I can remember Jimmy Rollins, very talented, but I remember him being really down as a young player in AAA, like wondering, I think, am I good enough to do this? Well, look at the career he had. He has he's like, could be a Hall of Fame player for the career that he had in the major league. So you just never know. But those are a few guys that stood out.
That's %
in my time.
Yeah, absolutely. And Don, with that being said, is there something that you would say? I mean, you last coached in the major leagues in 2021.
Yeah.
Would you say, with the way modern hitting is going nowadays, is there something that from the old school way of coaching and the old school way of teaching hitting, is there something that that's missing nowadays from, say, 1995 compared to nowadays that you wish would be implemented more?
Well, I'm sure every generation of coaches and players thinks, back in the day we did it this way. And I think it's important to learn and adjust and adapt and evolve. Certainly the game now, from an offensive standpoint, can garner a lot of criticism, just because there's a lot of the perception is hitters are only concerned about the 3 true outcomes, right? Walking to get on base, don't care about the strikeout or hitting the ball out of the ballpark. And for me, the methodology, I think, has changed over the years. I think there is, back in the day, it was more a reliance on opinion and gut feel, which I think has a place in the game. And now there's probably more reliance on the numbers and the analytics, which is okay too. I mean, but I think the art of teaching and the art of coaching is knowing your players so well that you're able to pull every resource available, whether that's your experience, your gut instinct, what the analytics are saying, what your eyes are telling you, pull all of that together, filter out all the noise, and make something that is that each individual player can take a hold of to actually, enhance their development and their improvement. Because at the end of the day, whether you believe, I had a friend of mine, it was actually Todd Green, who is a longtime scout now, said, I'm not old school or I'm not new school. I'm in school. I'm always trying to learn.
Always.
And my argument has always been, if you're really a teacher, you haven't taught. You can't really call yourself a teacher until your student, in this case, the player, has learned, and not only learned, but able to apply to be able to perform at their best. So wherever you can pull resources to enhance, their performance and their confidence, their ability to perform in a game, take advantage of it. Don't say no to anything, but you have to be really good at being able to filter out different things, especially with players who have a tendency to lean towards being very self-critical and overanalyze things. They want more information a lot of times, and sometimes the best approach with them is to give them less so they can build trust in what they're already doing.
Yeah.
And
go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I just feel like you see very often now in the MLB, some players, not to say like mentally weak is the right word, but confidence is arguably the biggest part in the game of baseball. Whether you're a pitcher, whether you're in the batter's box, you gotta be confident in that you're gonna be able to, go out there and strike someone out, or go out there and put bat to ball and drive one in the gap. If you don't have the confidence that you can do any of those things, you're not gonna see production. So I think that answers 1,000%, on par. And then Clay, what do you have to add?
Yeah, Don, I was gonna touch on what you said. I got lucky. I grew up in Atlanta when I was little. I got to see the Bobby Cox teams, and
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of what you mentioned about knowing your guys so well. I think about the 2010 Braves. They had Eric Kinsky on their bench, who just mashed right-handed hitting. I mean, I remember the NLDS that year. He had a homer against the Giants. But then also on the flip side of that, you had guys like Matt Diaz, who crushed left-handed hitting. It was, you know, I think, like you said, getting to learning your guys, and I think that's something Bobby Cox did so well. Is he balanced that lineup by being able to put guys in situations that he knew they'd succeed. And I think
Yeah.
that's such a critical part of baseball that's kind of just been somewhat missing in a sense nowadays.
Well, you talk about confidence, and for me, confidence is, a lot of players are conditioned from a very young age to feel good about themselves if they perform well,
Mhm.
and lose confidence when they don't. And I really came to believe that confidence is really the state of mind that says, regardless of what's happened most recently, regardless of my most recent at bat or my most recent stretch of games, I'm capable of stepping in the box and performing. So it's really an attitude that you choose to adopt. And there are strategies to enhance that in a player. And you have to, one of those things is simply sitting down with them and saying, okay, over the course of a long season, it's unrealistic to think that every day is going to be great for you. You're going to go through stretches of time where things aren't going your way or aren't going well. And so we need to pre-plan for those moments and say, okay, the next time you run up a stretch where you're 0 for 15 or 0 for 20 and you can't buy a hit, are you going to lose confidence, or are you going to make the choice to say, okay, I knew this was coming, so I've planned in advance how I'm going to act, how I'm going to talk to myself, and how I'm going to respond so I can come out of it more quickly. And to me, that's, it was really interesting for me I was in development for 21 years at the minor league level, between managing in the minor leagues and being a hitting coordinator before I got to Pittsburgh in 2008 as a major league hitting coach. And I remember thinking, okay, now, and I never played in the big leagues, but I remember thinking, okay, now that I'm at the major league level, these guys, they're going to be confident because they're big leaguers. And what I found was the same struggles that guys might have transitioning from high school or college into pro ball and trying to climb the minor league ladder, those insecurities they have, those doubts, the anxiety associated with trying to make it to the big leagues, were just as prevalent in a lot of guys who were established major league players, because now there's, especially in this day and age, there's way more scrutiny. There's way more opinions. Everybody's got an opinion on somebody's performance. And so there was this sense of, it was really eye-opening for me when I got to Pittsburgh, because what I realized was there was a fragility associated with that level, just like a guy signing right out of high school. So that part of the game never goes away. There's always, I used to say, there's 3 guys who are hot, 3 guys who aren't, and everybody else is ready to go one way or the other. And my job, I felt, was to try and, enhance their hope and their faith in themselves and their outlook, and say, this is what you can be. This is what you're capable of. We just need to think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and Tyler, you want to go
No,
ahead?
yeah, I just find it fascinating how your mindset with like all these players and different egos, different personalities, how your mindset though remains the same. You don't change, how you're going to coach for anyone. Like, you're not going to give anyone special treatment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but just based off what I'm hearing, it's like you're unapologetically yourself when you're coaching these guys, and confidence is key. Confidence is production. But my question to you is, let's say there's a player, right? And I can name numerous players in the majors, even on the Orioles right now, who are killing, either lefties only or only righties only. And let's say if they're killing righties, they're a lefty. If they're killing lefties, they're a righty. How do you mechanically, or how do you, internally or mentally give them the confidence to where you can say, all right, you're going to be able to hit righty righty, you're going to be able to hit lefty lefty, and then once that happens, you're going to crush baseballs because you're already doing the part where you're hitting righties and you're already doing the part where you're hitting lefties. What's that process like when you're trying to get a player to, become as complete as they possibly can be in the box?
Well, I think part of one of the first things you may look at is what is a, let's say you're left on left and you're a left-handed hitter, you're really doing damage against right-handed pitching, but they bring in a left-hander and it's like you have no shot, right? Mm-hmm. To me, you have to look at what's the reason why. And I would always start with mindset. So years and years and years ago, when I first started as a roving hitting instructor, I could really break down the mechanics of everything you were doing. And then as time went on in that job, I realized that's not enough. So I came up with 4 things that I used to look to evaluate a hitter. And one was, do you believe you can do it? 2 is, do you get ready to do it? That's your timing. 3 is, are you in a good position to do it, that you repeat over and over and over? And 4, are you great with your eyes? Meaning, do you pick the ball up early? Do you follow the ball all the way to the barrel? And we know we can't see the ball hit the bat. It's too fast, but we keep our eyes with the barrel, which keeps all components of your swing together. So for me, in that situation, let's say the left on left situation, the first place I would go to is talk to me about the difference when you have a right-hander on the mound versus a left-hander on the mound. Do your thoughts change? Does the perception of yourself as a hitter change? And you may not have to go to anything mechanical if that first question stops them in their tracks and they go, yeah, and I can speak from personal experience. I switch hit. And when there was a lefty on the mound, whether it was a starter or a reliever, I was like, okay, I don't care if I get to 2 strikes. I know I can still hit the ball hard. I know I can be selective. I don't have to be in a hurry. And then when I went to hit left-handed, so that maybe 6 feet between the right-handed batter's box and the left-handed batter's box, it was like swing at the first thing close, put it in play. I don't want to strike out. I don't want to look bad, right? We were in Shreveport. I was playing in Shreveport with the Giants in 1985, and I kept getting beat by a fastball in hitting left-handed. They kept pumping fastballs in, and my stride was across in toward home plate, and I buried my hands, so I had no room to work. So I was either rolling it over to the first baseman, running hard to first, yelling obscenities the whole way down the line, because you can see that's the worst ball to hit as a left-handed hitter, because you see your future playing out. You're out, the first baseman fields it. He beats you to the bag every time. But I remember being in Shreveport, and I said, tonight we got this guy, Mike Dunn. He was a former #1 pick with the Cardinals. Really good fastball and a really good curveball. And I
lefty,
remember
right?
telling myself that night, I am not going to get beat by the fastball. So he threw me a fastball first pitch. I hooked it way foul on the first base line. He threw it again. I hooked another one over by the first base dugout. He threw me another one, and I swung and missed. And the problem was, it was a curveball, but my timing was in my mind was set to fastball. I completely finished my swing, and after I completed my swing, the curveball he threw me 0-2 hit me in the back leg, and that's when I thought, well, maybe I ought to think about doing something else,
doing something differently.
Start with mindset. I think you say, talk to me about the difference, and that's why knowing your players and building relationship and trust is so important. Because you've got to get honest feedback from them. They got to feel like talking to you is a safe place to go where they can be honest with you. And if they say, you know what, I don't know, I'm not seeing it as well, or if it's something not like a mental hang up, then in my mind, you start working your way down the process. You get in the video room and you say, let's look at your timing. When are you getting started and getting moving left versus right? Okay, that's okay. Now let's look at the position you're getting into. Maybe that's the next thing you go to. Or Are you trying to do too much? Are you really worried about pulling the ball, which I guess is a mindset thing? So your eyes are leaving a little bit early. So it kind of stays. I found that in a teaching sense, sticking to those four things and kind of going down the checklist in that order, you could always find your answer somewhere within those four things.
That's awesome. Anything to add?
Yeah, it's funny, when you mentioned that, because the way you talk, it makes it seems like, well, not only are you coaching, but you're almost a therapist in a sense. You're working with these guys emotionally every day. I started working in sales a couple months ago, and I was struggling for a while. And so you can ask Tyler. I'm very critical all the time of the Orioles, but I had to sit down and think about it. Say I get 10 opportunities a month, I'm going to make one or two sales. I mean, that's in baseball terms, you're batting 200. At the end of the day, I had to learn that you're going to fail. And I think that's one thing, I think everybody, not everybody, but most people kind of forget growing up is failure is just a part of living. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you too, is there somebody that in your days coaching, kind of was in that same mindset of they hated failing. Everybody hates failing, but once they learned how to fail correctly, did you see them all of a sudden become who they could be in a sense that stood out to you?
That's a really interesting question because, I don't know that guys who are super competitive ever say, "Hey, I didn't get the job done," and can be good with it and just kind of let it roll off their back. But I think what players learn to do, some can navigate that on their own. Some need a little bit of help. Is they learn to frame it the right way. And what I mean by that is, let's sit here and let's make a list. Okay. You guys are two hitters. Okay. And we're going to make a list. When you go up 400 bat in a game, I want you to tell me everything you're in control of. Okay. And we make our list, right? How I walk into the box, my mindset, my mentality, when I get ready to hit, what I choose to swing at, all of those things. Am I ready to hit? Am I thinking I'm going to hit until my eyes tell me, no, that's not a pitch I want to hit? And then on the other side of the sheet of paper, let's make a list of everything I'm not in control of, which could be what he throws me. I have no idea what the pitcher's going to throw. The calls that umpires make, although in a sense the ABS system is made a little bit easier on a hitter from that standpoint. Once the ball leaves my bat, excuse me, somebody making a great play, all things out of my control, but hitters become so focused on the very end result and they equate success only with the ultimate outcome. So hitters that learn to deal with what you're talking about, they learn to have victories and successes that may not be the end result. And I think the guys, that's a much healthier perspective to have. And the guys that can do that are the guys that are more consistent performers because they don't ride this roller coaster, all these wild ups and downs associated with hitting so often.
Son,
That's really interesting because I want to ask you not really like a controversial question, but for our viewers, and I'm not going down a rabbit hole here, but it's funny that you say that, like, sometimes if you hit a ball and it has a great exit velocity, the process is correct, just not the result that we wanted, right? And as a coach, if one of your players gets a 109-mile-per-hour line out to, the left field or the center field, or you're pulling it, you're happy with that. Of course you are. But a team like the Orioles, they're first in hard hit rate this season. I think it's 41.4% in hard hit rate, but the production isn't there. Is that something that, like, if you were still coaching, if you were still the hitting coach on a team and your team had a 41.4% hard hit rate, would that be something that you're concerned about? Like, hey, the ball's not getting down? Or are you looking at it and you're saying, hey, guys, our process is right. Just stay the course and continue doing it. Results will come.
Yeah, I mean, for me in general, you have to me, you have to have a way of saying, okay, what does it mean to be productive, right? The obvious things are the hits. The obvious things are the doubles in the gap, the home runs, whatever your criteria is that equates to success. I mean, that sounds like it's one component for sure. And then you have to be able to look, is that the only component that equates to success? Not necessarily for any team, just for what I spoke about. I mean, theoretically, you could go up and you could hit every ball hard and never get a hit.
Right.
We had a kid when I was rolling with the Phillies in Lakewood, New Jersey. I was in for my 5-day stint. And the first at bat, he hit a one-hop bullet to the shortstop. Shortstop kind of olayed it, picked it, threw him out at first, right? He's out. He runs back to the dugout. His teammates are like, hey, way to hit it, He takes his helmet off. He puts it in the bat rack. His second at bat, he hits the same ball, but this time to the second baseman. One-hop bullet, makes a great play, throws him out. This time, some of his teammates, hey, way to hit it. Now the helmet goes a little bit harder into the bat rack. Like he's kind of getting irritated, right? His third at bat, he hits a bullet into the left center field gap. He was a right-handed hitter. Out of nowhere, the left fielder, full out dive, makes this incredible play. Now he comes back to the dugout, doesn't even get to the bat rack. The helmet's against the wall. His teammates are all afraid. And so I waited a couple innings, and I went up to him and I said, you're 3 for 3 if you think about it. And I walked away. And of course, he didn't want to hear that. So the next day we're in the cage, and I said, I understand they're your at-bats, they're not my at-bats. I said, but everything that was in your control, getting the right pitch to hit, being ready to hit it, hitting it hard, you did. So as a hitter, you have to be able to say to yourself, you know what? I did everything that I could have done. So I'm going to make the choice mentally to be 3 for 3 instead of 0 for 3. There's no hitter at any level of baseball, and particularly in the big leagues where they're so scrutinized, that wants to fail. It's the desire to succeed sometimes that causes the failure. They want to succeed so badly for so many different people and so many different reasons, and none of them want to fail. At any level, but particularly at the major league level, they all have the desire to get the job done. But sometimes that desire to get the job done makes them hurry up to get the job done. And that's when there's a breakdown. And I used to use the phrase with the hitters, always ready, never in a hurry. Sure. And what I meant by that was if there's a runner at third and one out and the infield's in, what's your job? And initially they would say to drive the guy in. I said, no, that's not your job. Your job is to know what you're trying to do, what's your plan, and what pitch or what location matches up with your plan, and then go execute your plan. And the byproduct of that will be getting the guy in from third. But so many hitters get in those situations and they say to themselves, I got to get the guy in from third. So the first thing close, it's just like when I was hitting left-handed, they swing at it and they roll a ball back to the pitcher and the guy has to stay at third, and they're pissed and everybody's pissed. The fans are pissed, and I get it. But you have to have ways to go, okay, here's what my job is in this situation. And the more you can adhere to that as a hitter and slow the situation down, the more productive you're going to be.
All about execution.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when you put it like that. It's the simplicity of it. It's the minute you start overthinking things, all of a sudden that's when things go downhill. And to transition with that, it's funny, Tyler and Don, looking at the 2008 Pirates in which you coached, Tyler pointed out the Orioles with their 41% hitting, hard hit rate. You look at this lineup, Ryan Domit hit 318 that year. Xavier Nady hit 330. The lowest guy in the 9 starting order that, Baseball Reference has is hitting 242 for his batting average. If you look at it, it's, just transition. It's funny to look at how baseball's changed even in just 18 years. You go from these guys, getting on base is so important. And then just it's obviously still is, but just the way the game is played is so different. I mean, if say you had to look, say from 2008 to now, is there something besides, the things that we've mentioned that you noticed even in a difference in the 10 years between, say, your last year in Cincinnati and your first year in Pittsburgh?
there are differences, right? And I think players are going to gravitate towards what they perceive to be important. And at the major league level, for any team, players are going to gravitate towards what's going to get them paid. They all have a desire to do well. They all, when you first get to the big leagues, your whole goal is you're so happy to be there. It's your lifelong dream, right? For many, many players. And then once you're there, you want to stay there. You want to perform well enough to stay there. And that becomes your focus. And then the longer you play and the more you're a consistent performer and you've earned the right to stay there, then you want to be a part of winning. You want to win. You want to be, it's kind of a natural progression in the mentality of a hitter. But I think players are players. I think players, they want to do well. In general, they want to do the right thing. They want to be the best that they can be. And a lot of that motivation to be their best internally all comes from different places, right? Some it's about making money. Some it's about taking care of their family. Some it's about just discovering how good they can be. And the money and all that, the accolades are secondary to that. So I don't think in that respect that players have changed so much, but I do think, and this was true of my time in the minor leagues, if a player perceived that being a good teammate and being selfless when they're at the plate in terms of maybe moving a guy over or something, trying to play for that one run was going to help them move to the next level, then you can bet they were going to try and do it. So I think whatever the team, any team, highlights as being important, I think they're going to try and, in a lot of ways, try and move towards that.
100%. And that's one last thing I wanted to bring up with, philosophies changing is bunting. It's something I talked to Tyler about a ton. It's, something you really don't see a ton of nowadays, and playing small ball. I want to hear more. What was your philosophy with bunting? Do you wish that you'd see more of it nowadays? Is it something that you think should be taught to everybody from, whether you're hitting 40 homers or, you are that guy that's got, going to have 30 stolen bases?
Well, a couple things for me. So when guys are working their way up through the minor leagues, and this has probably changed some because a lot of organizations don't really utilize bunting much. I think it's a great weapon for guys that can run. I think it's a great on-base weapon for anybody that maybe not feeling good swinging the bat. If they're giving you an opportunity to get on base, there's a chance. I think it can be a great opportunity to put pressure on the defense. So my stance on it, like in development, was, let's say you're a third or fourth hitter in Clearwater, Florida, for the Clearwater, well, I don't know what they are now, the Threshers, but back in the day, they were the Clearwater Phillies. But you're hitting 3, 4, 5 in the lineup. Now, let's say tomorrow they call, this is high A ball at the time, they call tomorrow and say, hey, we want you to go to the major league club. We're calling you up to the big leagues out of high A ball. Do you think you're going to be a 3, 4, or 5 hitter in the big leagues? And the answer is probably no. And if you are, then that means your big league club is really, really bad, right? So you're probably going to hit down in the order, and you may be asked to do some of those things. So you might as well learn how to do it now. The Braves had a great saying when I was roving there. They said, when a player transitions from the minor leagues to the big leagues, the only question that he should ask are, what are the signs? Because they know how to play basically the Braves way of baseball. And I used to really like the bunt, managing, but I remember managing at the AAA level in Vancouver in the Pacific Coast League. And we were in the playoffs and we played an extra inning game and lost. And I bunted. We get the leadoff man on, we butt him to second. And Vancouver was notoriously tough ballpark to hit in. Dead air, grass was about this long. And it took a lot to score a runner from second base, right? Very few home runs, very few balls in the gap. And so what I started doing in place of the bunt, we get the leadoff guy and I started hitting and running because we had guys that could handle the bat and they were going to make contact. And, it was going to give you at least what a sacrifice bunt would give you. But if the ball found a way through the Velcro grass, it might give you a first and third, nobody out situation. So I still think it's a good tool to utilize in the right situations with the right people. But I think the tough ask is to have a guy, you see it a lot come up in the playoffs with teams that the situation says we need a run here to win the game. They haven't bunted all year, right? And now to ask a guy to get a bunt down, that's a tough ask. So I think as any organization has to say, this is kind of our philosophy. This is how we're going to utilize it. And this is what we expect from you guys as players. And this is when we might use it and incorporate it starting in spring training.
Yeah. And just, before you ask, Tyler, I just want to say guys like Terrence Gore, rest in peace. That was how he made his living in the big leagues. That was, come the Royals knew they were going to need him in September and October, come up, bunt, pinch run. I mean, the little nuances of baseball are what, gives guys careers and that typically wouldn't when guys like Terrence Gore aren't hitting at the levels, say, and Alcides Escobar could,
Yeah. And we had a guy in Cincinnati, Billy Hamilton, who, especially left-handed would utilize the bunt. And he was so gifted in terms of his confidence on the base paths. I'd never seen a guy more disruptive than Billy, right? Just the thought of him being on base. Pitchers used to do things that were really uncharacteristic and they kind of get panicky. And so he would utilize that. And it didn't even have to be a great bunt for him to beat it out and be a threat on the bases.
He was incredible. There's a lot of clips from when I was a teenager watching Billy Hamilton. I'm like, I wish I could run like him, but no, I enjoyed fast food too much. So
I saw him score in Cincinnati. He scored from first base on a pickoff attempt. They tried to pick him off. The ball got away from the first baseman, and he scored. And the ball never left. It went over by the first base dugout, but it never. It was crazy. He was.
I remember one time he bunted and he jumped out of the way. Oh, yeah. The guy dove into first. It was
How many players could do that nowadays? Like score from first on a poor pickoff throw?
Not many. Right? I mean, I did this professionally for 35 years, and it's not just a matter of speed. It's a matter of the daring and the awareness to look and see and decipher quickly. It's almost like a quarterback,
Yeah.
It's like a quarterback going through his progression on his reads and seeing things in a split second that somebody else, maybe who's more gifted physically, may not see. And Billy had the speed and the daring and the awareness to make things like that happen, for sure.
That's awesome. My final question, and then I think we're going to wrap things up, but right now, in the current MLB, could be an injured player, healthy player, but in your opinion, Don, who is the best hitter in baseball? What makes that hitter so special?
Oh boy. Wow. That's a really good question.
Because there's so many good ones right now. It's ridiculous.
Give me some names and I'll see what I.
Okay. Obviously you got Judge, Ohtani, Yordan Alvarez right now. I think personally he's the best hitter on the planet.
Yeah.
James Wood. James Wood
Junior Caminero.
Junior down in Tampa. Bobby Witt is always, just as complete of a hitter. Or we can go the route, like an Otto
Luis
Lopez,
Arraez.
first-time All-Star, Luis Arraez. Guys who just find ways to get on base, slap the ball into the field.
I think it depends on what your flavor is. I mean, you certainly can't argue Judge or Ohtani, just because of the threat in term, you look at Judge's year last year and living here in the Seattle area, of course, everybody in this area is biased that Cal Raleigh didn't win MVP, but you get around the neighborhood folks and they Raleigh should have won the MVP. And I said, he had a great year, right? 100%. I mean, unprecedented year, especially for a catcher. But I said, have you taken just a second to look at what Judge did in terms of average and homers and on base and every number, right?
And he missed.
And Ohtani certainly is, what he can do at the plate in terms of power and speed. and being able to pitch. I mean, those are certainly two guys that you can't argue with for being the best in the game right now, for sure.
One last thing, Don, I wanted to ask before Tyler wraps it up was I mentioned to Tyler, you were coaching during COVID, especially at the big league level.
Yeah.
What was that like? I mean, being sent home in the middle of March and then not knowing when you guys were coming back, and when they said, okay, we're starting July 24th, what was that like?
And something to add on that real quick too. Like, how do you continue to foster relationships with these players? Because I mean, obviously too, those were a very young team. Yeah, they were a very young team. How do you continue to, grow and build that foundation with those young guys that you've only been with for about like a year prior to COVID?
Yeah, so the first part of that is we did some Zoom meetings, and then I, made personal phone calls, and we emailed them some information. We had a guy there that helped me with that named Grant Anders, who I believe is now with the Nationals. And he was really good at taking information and being able to present numbers, but in a visual format. So we sent the players and had conversations about what they had done the year prior, the full season, and showed them, where they were doing well and maybe some of their opportunities for growth against different types of pitches, different parts of the strike zone. Things like that. So that was kind of the ongoing conversation. And then, to answer your question, Clay, when we went back, it was strange. It was a little weird getting on the plane, going back there, because there was no vaccine then. I mean, Major League Baseball, I think, did a really good job of creating protocols to try and keep everybody safe. And what it really did, I mean, you couldn't even get in to work without taking the spit test and making sure you were clear. And that was the first part of your day. And then you were very limited in terms of connection, in terms of actually working with guys. Everything in the cage was with the mask on. Out on the field and in the dugout for us was with the mask on. I think the players had the choice, when they were playing, if they were in the game, not to wear it. But if you're on the bench, you were supposed to wear a mask. And so it really limited, I thought, connection time, like hands-on development time, because by the time you were able to even be allowed into the ballpark, before batting practice, you had very limited time in the cage. So you did the best you could, and everybody just kind of did what they had to do to get through it. And thank goodness nobody, really, I mean, some guys got it, but nothing too severe. But it was kind of a surreal experience. You couldn't really leave your hotel room. You had to order your meals that somebody would bring and leave outside your door when you're on the road. It was a very controlled environment, as it should have been.
There's so many like new features now. I feel like that also were implemented from COVID. Like if I'm Uber Eats and food, it's like they have a leave outside the door feature now, because like COVID did that. And now like Zoom and StreamYard, like their stock is booming because everything's remote or like hybrid now.
Yeah.
So it's really insane, like the grasp that it had on, just like society. But Clay, wrap us up, man.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, I mean, you were one of the very few people in this world that went to a baseball game, coached a baseball game with nobody in the crowd. I mean, that's just, you think about that aspect of it, and you think about even just a broad scape of Major League Baseball. A team like the Orioles at that point, you had your minor league camp in Bowie. I mean, there were so many young guys around the game that their growth had to get stunted for a year because, I mean, everything was shut down. There was no minor leagues. So, I wanted to thank you once again for taking the time to talk to us. And I mean, I had to, like you said, it was surreal, and, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. And I would say one last thing about the games themselves during COVID. Nobody there, and a lot of people put up the fake faces all over the ballpark, right?
Right.
And they were piping in crowd noise and stuff. The games themselves, you wouldn't have known if there was a crowd there or not. They were very competitive guys. I was really proud of baseball and baseball players in general. They played the game, and they didn't play. I'm sure it was maybe more challenging not having the roar of the crowd, but they played it, and they played it hard, and they played it right, and it was super competitive still. And it was in that respect, it was really fun and encouraging to be a part of.
And it was exciting too. I mean, Tyler, you think back to it. I mean, the Orioles were in it until really late September that year. I mean,
Yeah.
with such a short season, it
Yeah.
gave teams that were even rebuilding and teams that weren't really supposed to be there. You think about that White Sox team was about a year away, and they made it. The Miami Marlins, they made it that year. I mean, it gave, 60 games, everybody has a shot.
Yeah, it's like playing summer ball.
Yeah,
Pretty much, yeah.
seriously.
60 games.
I feel like it also built, good habits for a lot of the players, and you still see, players during COVID. It's like Don, said these baseball players, they still went out and they played, and arguably they played harder. And it's because when there aren't fans there heckling you, it's literally just you, a ball, and other players.
Yeah.
That's all that there is, right? There's minimal engagement, minimal dialogue, minimal conversations. Your only job isn't to make small talk with the guy on second base with you. It's to go out there, throw a nasty pitch or hit a ball wherever you can put it. And I feel like the COVID baseball, even though it sucked for the whole world, I think it was beneficial to a lot of sports because it really, put the highlight and the beam on these players and their just sole ability and their pure God-given talent and skill. And you still see guys, who broke out in COVID continue to, get better and better and better. But also some guys who broke out in COVID, they've only gotten worse because maybe COVID helped them mentally, right? Like it's insane how psychological baseball is. And for you being a hitting coach, you have to find all those, like intricacies with all these players and figure out what works for them and what doesn't. I tip my cap to you. I don't want to show the audience my hat because we talked about this, or my hair because we talked about this before. I have a crazy hair day, but I tip my cap to you being an MLB hitting coach. After the conversation we had, it seems like no joke. So, are you planning on, maybe getting back in the ring, or are you smooth sailing for now down in Seattle?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about it. I mean, I still really enjoyed what I did and the connections that I made throughout the game with players and other coaches. And I guess there's a small part of me that thinks, there's still something some value I could add somewhere. I don't know if doing that on a full-time basis is in my playbook right now, but I enjoy talking about it, and I appreciate you guys having me on because it's kind of a fun outlet for me to talk about the game and
welcome on anytime.
Some of my experiences.
Yeah, like they
you're
said,
absolutely welcome on anytime.
Welcome on anytime. We love getting inside the brain and mind of players, coaches, former players, former coaches, just people that are in the game that can talk baseball. And if you ever do decide to get back in the ring, you got two fans here at Orioles.
Oh, don't forget about our us little folks over here. I'm not little, but
Oh no, this is big for me. Thank you.
Always.
I appreciate you guys.
Always. And before we wrap things up, I want to give one more shout out to our sponsor, O Squared Residential Design. Just like we build winning sports content and interviews, O Squared builds winning kitchens and bathrooms. They're woman-owned, family-operated right here in Maryland. Excellence in every square inch. Check them out at osquaredesign.com. That's osquaredesign.com. That's going to wrap up today's episode 21 of Orioles Theory. We've been putting out a lot of content for you guys. Obviously, All-Star break is coming to an end. Those are back in action Friday against the Astros. Right, Clay?
Yep, against the Astros. Hopefully they take 2 out of 3. And we'll be back on Sunday to recap that series and look into the week ahead going into Boston for a crucial series.
1,000%. Mr. Don Long, once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on. We had a pleasure talking with you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Always, if there's ever time that you want to just hop on and use us as an outlet, we'd be more than happy to have you on. But that's gonna wrap things up. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms at O's Theory. You guys can listen to O's Theory on all streaming services wherever you get your podcasts for the whopping price of free $99. No, not free $99. Make sure to check us out on socials once again. But that's going to do it for Tyler Barbaras, Clay Selgin, Mr. Don Long. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out and go O's.
Thank you.